Hi everyone, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who might not know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. Before we get started today, I'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and now we're jumping right into the new year, January 1st. And I'm sure we've all made some great resolutions that we want to do in this new year. And one thing that we should all keep in mind is to keep studying Spiritism and keep learning about it, because our work with that should never stop, because there'll always be more to learn. So something really important, and we're starting off the year right, is by continuing to study Spiritism. And as we've been doing for the past over 2 years, we'll read the Spirits book, and we'll go through the questions, and we're almost at the end. We'll go through questions, the answers and the explanations, and see what we can get from those answers. If you guys can remember back, 2 weeks ago we left off talking about the duration of future atonements. So atonements are making up for things that we've done wrong in our past, right? So we have to go through trials and atonements. Trials are the things, okay, these tests that we have to pass these tests, and we have these atonements that, okay, we did something wrong, now let's go back and fix it. So we're talking about the duration of that. And in question 1009, the question was, it follows then that the atonements imposed on spirits are never eternal. So the question was about the atonements that we have to face, the things that we have to make up for. They're never going to be forever, right? We're never going to suffer forever for those things that we did wrong. And there's been many different answers that have come from this. So last week, 2 weeks ago, we left off talking about Plato's answer, and now this week we'll continue, and this one will continue with the answer from the Apostle Paul. So to that question, the Apostle Paul answered, gravitating towards divine union is the goal of humanity. 3 things are necessary to reach this goal: knowledge, love, and justice. 3 things conflict with this goal: ignorance, hatred, and injustice. You are untrue to these fundamental principles when you compromise the idea of God by exaggerating God's severity, thereby suggesting that the human being, God's creation, has more clemency, compassion, love, and true justice than your attribution to the Creator. You even destroy the very idea of hell and purgatory by making it as ridiculous and inadmissible, according to your beliefs, as is, by your hearts, the distinguishing spectacles of the Middle Age with its torturers, executioners, and burnings at the stake. Do you hope to maintain it as an ideal model when you have eliminated the principle of blind retaliation forever from society's legislation? Brothers and sisters in God and Jesus Christ, believe me, you must either resign to letting all your doctrines perish at your own hands or modify them. You must revitalize them by opening them to the compassionate action that the good spirits are now providing. The idea of hell, fully of glowing furnaces and boiling cauldrons, might have been admissible during an iron century. In the 19th century, however, it is nothing more than empty images. They can scare young children, but these children are no longer frightened when they grow up. By persisting in upholding this terrifying illusion, you generate skepticism, which is the root of every sort of social disorder. I shudder at witnessing the foundation of social order shaken and crumbling into dust, due to the lack of an effective penal sanction. Let all who are driven by a vibrant and passive faith, the advanced men and women of human enlightenment, join in their efforts to erase antiquated fables and resuscitate the idea of true penal sanction in harmony with the values, traditions, and insight of your time. So here what he's saying is that if we keep thinking that God is going to punish us forever, then that means that God wouldn't be just, that God wouldn't be loving and caring and compassionate, right? Because then God's just letting his own creations just suffer forever. So if we think that, isn't that kind of crazy? That means we think we're more passionate and loving than God is, which can't be right. And they're saying that we have a lot of these ideas that kind of show this, that, oh, God's not going to be compassionate or loving. Like, we think of the idea of hell with this fire that's just gonna, this horrible place that's just gonna be burning people and you're gonna be stuck in forever. If we think of something like this, maybe in the past when we weren't as evolved as we are, we could think, oh yeah, these things, we could think that because we had no better understanding. But now we've evolved a little bit and we should have a better understanding of these situations and that how it's actually not like that. How that's just an image that people have painted. So he's saying, let us change these things that are in our cultures, in our religions, in our societies that are putting this kind of bad image on God, on the Creator, and realize that He is just and compassionate. And if He's just and compassionate, then there's something must be wrong with that image of just an eternal fire, of just suffering forever. And then he continues, who, in fact, is the guilty? It is the one who, by the soul's deviation from the right path, has veered from the true goal of creation, which consists of a harmonious worship of the beautiful and good, idealized by the human archetype, the man-God, through Jesus Christ. So, quite simply here, he's saying that who are the people that are guilty of this? It's the people who have left that path, who have deviated from the path of just following God and following Jesus' examples and doing all these beautiful and good things. The people who've deviated from that, which is all of us at some point, because we know we're not at that level of perfection yet, we're all guilty of this, right? Because there's all times that we don't follow this path that's been laid out for us. And of course, we've talked about how we have our own free will, and we don't have to follow that path if we don't want to, but there's a reason that path is there for us, right? To make good decisions, to follow that, to evolve quicker, to become better. And if we deviate from that, it's just going to take longer because we're going to deviate from it and then have to find our way back to that path. And then he continues, what is punishment? The natural consequence of that deviation, the amount of pain necessary to distinguish the offender, and which causes his departure from what is right by experiencing the suffering caused by that deviation. Punishment is the stimulus that drives the soul through its afflictions to turn towards itself and to return to the right path. The soul's purpose of atonement is rehabilitation and emancipation, and to assume that it lasts forever would to be denied the reason for existing. So here they're saying, so what is punishment? Punishment is when we deviate, like we said, when we go away from that path, and then the amount of pain or suffering that we cause when we deviate from that path, our punishment is going to be to repay for that and fix that, and so that we can return to that right path. So that's going to be that punishment, right? So that's like our whole existence. We're on this path. Oop, we deviated. Oop, we have to fix that. We have to go do some atonements, fix that, get back on the path. Then we're going on the path again, then we deviate, we have to fix that, we fix those mistakes we made, then we get back on the path. So they're saying to think that if that punishment, if that fixing for that mistake lasts forever, then what's the point of our existence, right? Because we're never going to get back on that path. So they're saying logically, God's always going to let us get back on that path, right? On that path of good. So that punishment, that atonement's not going to last forever, because eventually we will get back on the path. It might take even centuries even to get back on that path or to fix that mistake that we've made, but we will get there. And then he continues, honestly, stop trying to establish a parallel of duration between good, the essence of the Creator, and malevolence, the essence of the creature. This establishment a groundless standard of retribution. On the contrary, confirm the gradual decrease of imperfections and atonements through successive lives, and you will reach divine union by reconcile reason with compassion. So here again, he's just summing up, trying to don't split up, don't mix together the goodness of the Creator of God and the things that go through human lives, right? Because we know we're nowhere close to as perfect as God, right? We can't, or Jesus, or any of those higher order spirits that we're looking up to. We're nowhere close to that. So stop trying to mix those two and think that, oh, God, if we make these mistakes, God can make those mistakes. No, it's completely different, right? We want to not mix those two and just do our best to stay on that path and follow that right track. And when we deviate, we have to make up for those mistakes, but we will get back on that right path. And how long it's going to take us to make up for those mistakes depends on us. And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment in that kind of sums it all up. People are inspired to do good and avoid vices if they feel that this course of action will be a rewarding one and keep them from being punished. However, if the threatened punishment appears under conditions that are contrary to reason, not only does it fail its goal, but it also leads people to reject everything, both the form and the basis. When the notion of a future is introduced in a rational way, people do not reject it. Spiritism provides this reasonable explanation. So here what they're saying is that some people believe, even us, we are aspired to do good things because we want something good to come out of it, right? If we know, okay, if I'm going to do this good thing, I'm not going to suffer, I'm not going to be punished because I'm doing these good things, perfect. But then people start doing good things and they're doing good things, but then something wrong still happens, something bad still happens, something happens to them. So then they think, oh, why am I even doing this good thing? Because something bad's going to happen to me anyways. And then they're saying, Spiritism makes this more reasonable to understand because we know that, oh, it might not be something that I'm doing right now that I have to go through this punishment or this suffering, but maybe something I've done before. Most like always something I've done before, right? Because everything that happens to us is because of what we've done in our whole existence. So it's saying, while some people might think some punishments and some trials are maybe uncalled for or not reasonable, Spiritism brings us that reason, right? Brings us that explanation. And then he continues, the principle of eternal punishment makes the Supreme Being a merciless and cruel God. Is it rational to say that a ruler is very kind, compassionate, and tolerant, and wants nothing but happiness for everyone, when this ruler is jealous, vindictive, relentlessly severe, and punished 3/4 of the subjects with the most horrific torture for any offense or violation of the laws, even when the violations are the result of simple ignorance of the laws they violated? Is this not a blatant contradiction? Could God be less moral or virtuous than human beings? So here they're saying, isn't eternal punishment suffering forever? Wouldn't that be against all that God is about? We know that God is good and just. And if we had eternal punishment, that would make God cruel and merciless, right? Not giving anyone a second chance, right? If everyone's just suffering and just being tortured forever. So isn't that going against all that we believe God to be? And in that case, could God be less moral than human beings? We know that God is above all, right? All supreme. So how can he have lower morals and lower virtues than human beings themselves, right? Because I wouldn't make someone suffer forever, so why would God make someone suffer forever, right? And then he continues, this doctrine has another contradiction. Since God knows all things, God must have known in creating a spirit that it would disobey divine laws. Therefore, spirits must have been destined to eternal unhappiness and agony. Is this rational? So, if God did know that he was going to let these spirits suffer forever, he knew when he created them that they were going to be imperfect. Would that be fair that God created? Do you think God created a spirit and was like, oh yeah, they're going to suffer forever, they're going to be imperfect, they're going to be unhappy? Is that rational? No, right? We know that it's much the opposite, right? We all have that equal chance to get to that perfection, and we all will get there. It's just about what we do that is going to depend on how fast or slow we get there. Then he continues, with the principle of relative punishment, on the contrary, everything is justified. When God created a given spirit, undoubtedly it was known that it would do wrong. However, it was in God's design to provide the means for the spirit to become enlightened. The spirit must atone for its sins and make amends for its wrongdoings, so that it may be more firmly set in goodness. Therefore, the door to hope is never closed, and the moment when a spirit is delivered from suffering depends on the effort it changes into achieving its goals. This is something that all can understand the most meticulous logic and can accept. If the concept of future punishments were presented in this manner, there would be far few skeptics. So here it's saying that now when we're thinking about relative punishment, like, okay, I made this mistake, so I have to go through this type of punishment, but not forever, now it's justified, right? Now we can understand, okay, yeah, I made that mistake, so I need to suffer. I need to make up for that mistake to get back on the right path. And you know that when God created a spirit, when God created each and every one of us, He knew that we were going to do wrong things, that we weren't going to be perfect, right? Because He didn't create us perfect to begin with, right? We were created ignorant and simple. And it's up to us to get to that level of perfection. And it's up to us how long we're going to take to get to that level of perfection. But, of course, we were going to do wrong things. And, of course, we're going to have to suffer for those things, but not eternally, just so that we learn and can grow from that. And then he continues, we often use the word eternal, figuratively, to designate a long period with no fixed end, even though we know that the end, of course, comes at some point in time. For instance, there are the eternal snows of the mountain peaks and polar ice caps, although we know that our planet will end one day, and the feature of those regions may change due to the natural displacement of the Earth's axis, or by some natural disaster. In this specific case, eternal does not signify what which is infinitely everlasting. When we are sick or suffering from a long-term illness, we say that our suffering is eternal. Is it strange, then, that for spirits who have suffered for years, centuries, or millenniums to express themselves in the same manner? We must not forget that their inferiority prevents them from seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and they consequently think that they are destined to suffer forever. This belief is a part of their atonement. We borrow our beliefs in fire, burning ovens, and torture from the pagan Tartus. This belief has been completely abandoned by many of the most eminent theologians today. Only in certain schools are such fear-mongering allegories still presented as literature truths by some individuals who are more overzealous than enlightened. This is all very wrong, because young imagination, once passed in terror, will most likely become skeptics. Currently, theology admits that the word fire is used figuratively in the Bible, and is to be understood as meaning moral fire. People who have observed life and suffering beyond the grave, as communicating spirits explain it, understand how this suffering can be excruciating, although it is not of a physical nature. As for the duration of this suffering, many theologians are starting to acknowledge the restriction indicated above, and think that the word eternal may refer to the principle of sorrow itself, as the consequence of an absolute law, and not its application to each individual. The day religion accepts this interpretation and other concepts as product of enlightenment, the vast number of people who have been led astray will have their faith in God restored. So here he's summing up that it's also about our language, right? And we've talked about this throughout the Spirit's book, how we don't have the proper language to describe things. So sometimes when we use the word eternal, like even when we think of, the eternal snow, at mountaintops there's eternal snow. But we know that one day this earth won't exist, and then that snow also won't exist. So it's not really eternal. So we use the word eternal more lightly than the word might actually be. Because we might think, eternal suffering. But you can suffer for centuries, for millenniums even. But that's not eternity, right? That's not forever. Even if you have to go through centuries before you fix something, you'll still fix it, and then you'll still get on the right track, on the right path again, and then start again on that right path, right? Continue where you left off. So even though it may seem eternal, may seem like a really long period of time, it's not infinitely everlasting, right? So a lot of these words, and the same thing with the fire they're saying, when we see in the Bible this fire, right, like in hell, that there's going to be this fire, we can see it more now as a moral fire, as this, like, yes, you are going to suffer and that's going to be a pain, but it's not going to be a physical fire that you're in, right? So when more people start understanding what words are meant more figuratively than literally, this will help a lot of people understand and interpret things and concepts better. And now that's the end of that question in that section. And now we're on to the next section, which is resurrection of the body. Question 1010. Does the resurrection of the body signify reincarnation as now taught by spirits? So it's basically asking, does resurrection of the body mean reincarnation? Like, now that we know what reincarnation is, that the spirits have taught us reincarnation, does the resurrection of the body signify that? Does it mean that? And the spirits answered, how could it be anything else? This expression, and many others, only appears to be irrational when people take them literally, which leads to skepticism. When they are explained rationally, free thinkers accept them easily because they are used to reflection. Free thinkers, perhaps even more so than others, thirst for a future. They want nothing more than to believe, and they cannot acknowledge what science disproves. The doctrine of multiple lives is consistent with God's justice, and it alone explains what is otherwise inexplainable. How can you then doubt that its principle is founded in all religions? So here they're saying, yeah, exactly, how could it be anything else, right? But they're saying that this expression, like the resurrection of the body, it seems kind of crazy to a lot of people, right? But when we're taking it less literally and we're seeing it, when people take it literally, they might be led to skepticism, right? How did the body resurrect? But then when we learn about reincarnation and what the spirits have taught us, it makes it easier to accept these things and reflect and kind of see the bigger picture of the meaning. So it's important for us to not always take things literally, because things were put in simple terms for the people of the time to understand those things that Jesus were bringing, or those concepts. But now we have more understanding. We can see that, okay, maybe that's not literally that, but what is the meaning of that is what we should be looking at. And it's also saying here, when we're thinking about it, the doctrine of multiple lives, this is making it lines up with God's justice, and it lines up with all these things that we believe God to be, because then we know that even if we're suffering something now that we simply can't understand why, it's come from something we've done in the past, right? So this doctrine of multiple lives helps us to understand and helps it to align with what we believe God to be, right? Just and all-powerful and good. And the next question is rather long, so we'll leave it to next week so that we don't have to leave off in the middle of the question. But something interesting about this question is that it's labeled as 1010A is the second part of that question that we just read, but we can actually consider it as 1011 because he skipped 1011. Allan Kardec, when he was writing it, he actually missed 1011, but there was a 1010 part 2, so they kind of made the 1000 part A, 1010 part 2, they kind of made that into question 1011. But before we leave off today, I'd like to read a message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's date, January 1st. Little things. One resolution I have made and try always to keep is this: to rise above the little things. The faucet is leaking. We walk out of the house with mismatched socks. We run out of milk. We're low on gas. The yard needs mowing. We forget to thaw some meat for dinner. This sort of trivial issues can pile up to ruin a day, but only if we let them. We can't think big enough big thoughts all the time, but we can keep the little things in perspective and not let their sheer number overwhelm us. I'm going to take a deep breath, maybe even 2 or 3 deep breaths, and remind myself that as annoying as the minor problems of everyday life are, I'm not going to fret about them. I hope you all have a great new year, and if you all have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about, feel free to email me at kardecradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.